Hello everybody, how's it going today? Glowplasma 231 here, back in data, weekly Shonen Jump, issue number 17 of 2025. And man, did it feel weird sitting down and reading weekly Shonen Jump this week, because like, hey, on one hand, yeah, there was just no Kagurabachi this week. Of course, Takeru Hokuzono, the manga, needs to take a break. That is, of course, always valid. Any manga, I mean, Shonen Jump probably should give more breaks out than they do. I mean, really treat it like Weekly Shonen Sunday or like Young Jump, or I think Young Jump is what I'm talking about, right? I have like 30 different manga running, and because of that, they like every series take a break like every 3 weeks or something like that. I mean, I remember that's how it was with like Oshino's Ko's run. We get like 3 chapters, then a little bit of a break, if not like 4 chapters, then a break, somewhere in there. It's sort of similar to how One Piece does it. Like, hey, One Piece, we got it for 3 weeks, and then we don't have it at all, which I guess we didn't have One Piece this week, so I guess this is the beginning of our One Piece 3 issues we have it for, so that's pretty neat. But honestly, this was a very interesting week of Jump, because on one hand, there were some chapters that I really enjoyed. I was like, man, that's so awesome. Like, there's just a constant smile on my face, and others I'm like, okay, I like that, but I don't really know about how the pacing is going here and all that other stuff. But honestly, just a really good week of Jump to sit down and talk about, all things considered. I mean, every week of Jump is a good one, in my opinion, right? You never have a bad week of Jump. So what do we have? 14 series to talk about here. I did read these chapters like 3 days ago. I normally like to like sit down, read the chapters, and immediately record a video, but I've been out of my college town and all of that other various stuff, so I've not had ample time to do it. I mean, if you guys have been paying attention, I was like uploading a video every single day, and it was about 2 weeks or so, and then it just sort of sprouted out to where like, hey, I just didn't have time. I was back home hanging out with my family, doing all of that. So it was like, hey, I can't easily make a video, but hey, now that I'm back up at college, granted this should be like the 3rd or so video that comes out after all of that, but hey, either way, all things considered, we got 14 series to talk about. I'm not going to remember all the details from, but I still think it's going to be a good time to sit down and talk about them. So yeah, without any further ado, I just say, oh, I forgot to mention the whole thing of like, hey, how does this series work? Of course, we are going to be rambling about all of the series, 14 of them here, and then after I go through and ramble about them, I'll be ranking them from what was the best chapter week all the way down to what was the worst chapter week, and all of the other 12 spots in between, of course, from 2 to number 13. That's sort of how numbers work, and we'll also be picking my favorite character of the week, too. And now, with me remembering to say all that stuff, let's talk about weekly Shonen Jump. So, of course, we start off with One Piece, and One Piece this week was a little interesting. We see a moment where all of the various holy knights are sitting down, sort of like eating a brunch or like a lunch or dinner, or whatever they're doing, and just debating over everything that's going on and how they really need to get all of these kids to the ship so they can transport the ship back to Mary Joa to get whatever they're trying to get out of these kids. We learn what Saint Somer's Devil Fruit is. I also forgot to mention we do have a very interesting color page where it looks like all of the straw hats are like racing on these like fish skis on the water, sort of. Reminds me of that one Mario Galaxy level when like you have to surf on the manta ray sort of thing, but like, hey, either way, we learned what Saint Somer's Devil Fruit power is, that he is a thorn man, so he's the thorn fruit, which is a little interesting. It sort of makes sense, like, hey, whenever any of the teachers go to try to touch a few of these kids, like, they just get hurt by all these various thorns, and that is why, because of this power, it seems like Saint Killingham's power may have something to do with dreams, or, well, we see what his Devil Fruit is. It is the Dragon Fruit mythical type, model Kirin, Dream Manifesting Man, so it does have to do with dreams. I forgot we actually get told what it is here, but it's a little bit interesting to see that, like, he's got the Kirin Devil Fruit, just like a little bit of a, that's pretty cool. Anyway, I just absolutely love Saint Killingham's design. It's just like so cool. I actually recently made a D&D character that was sort of like this whole idea of like, hey, it's an octopus, but like he's got to have like this thing over his mouth to like, or thing over like almost a fishbowl over his head, pretty much like keep him alive. But pretty cool stuff we see up top there. We then cut down below. We're like, yes, Loki just got up, held Ragnir, hit the Jewel Tree Atom, of course, the world of Elbaf. Lightning struck down, did all of that various stuff, right? Harujin is pretty much trying to talk him down, pretty much, and the entire time they're just like doing all of this, and of course Loki is bluffing like, hey, I'm gonna do all of this stuff, when he's just actually incredibly weak. So Luffy ends up using one of his Gum air balloon attacks and pretty much just like knocks him straight onto the ground. And at this point, Luffy's just like, hey, don't let Loki die, Harujin. Like, it doesn't matter who it is. Like, don't let anybody die, no matter who they are. We see that Gerd does all of her stuff as a doctor to try to get Loki back up, and we pretty much just end off the chapter on this whole thing of like, Harujin talking about like how he killed father and all of this various stuff, right? And Loki just says like, hey, they all said that I went and killed dad with pure murder in my heart. but you don't believe that, do you? So it's like, all right, what is the big twist here? Of course, we know Loki is not got to be that evil of a guy. There's got to be some redeeming quality to him, but really, just what is it is really one of the big mysteries of this One Piece arc. So we'll just honestly put it sort of right in the middle, I think, is what I'm going to put it at for now, right? Ichi the Witch is up next, and of course the last thing that happened was that both Ichi and Gokuraku crashed down into the tent where the Bakugami, the slumbering magic, is currently being held, and pretty much went through, and who's his face? Ichi used his Inazori on it and pretty much like shocked the thing pretty much dead dry, right? We get a little bit of narration at the start of this chapter, pretty much explaining again, like, hey, anybody who tries to harm Lord Bakugami will be executed. That is just how the world works, right? So we didn't see the Gokuraku cut back to the present pretty much, where Gokuraku's going around, uses a 30% simple punch, and just goes through and punches the slumbering magic again, and like everybody's like, no, this is crazy, right? As all this happens, the person who's been showing, not Ichi, Deskross and Kumagi around pretty much is like, hey, guard, traitor's harmed Lord Bakugami, arrest him now! And Ichi and Gokuraku sort of just like get out of there like, yeah, we got some stuff going on. And as they're running away, we pretty much just see that, like, Gokuraku's like, hey, Ichi, plug your ears, as he uses a fake-out clap where he pretty much just goes and, like, claps his hands, and everybody's ears are just, like, shocked. They're like, oh, no, that really, really hurt. And as Gokuraku is running away, we see that he looks at Princess Richia, and they just sort of share a little bit of an interesting glance in this moment, right? We then see that, like, the guy who's been pretty much, like, the monk guy or whatever you want to call him, he's just like, hey guys, we need to go after those two criminals, and pretty much he looks over and sees that Deskross and Kumagi are just so both like, what has Ichi done here? What is that idiot doing? Like, I can't believe any of this, right? And the entire time, both Kumagi and Deskross are like, oh no, we don't know anything, like, we're completely unrelated, right? And the guy's like, but I didn't say anything yet. It's a really funny joke, right? He explains, like, hey, that blue-haired man is Gokuraku. He's one of our country's most wanted criminals. He's attempted to harm Lord Bakugami a number of times now. But, like, and every time he does, he somehow escapes us, right? And eventually he just asks, like, hey, Lady Witch, will you please help us out here to try to go through and catch these two, right? And Deskross is in, like, oh, wait a second. If they don't want to find Ichi and kill him, that means I'll be dead too, as we get this really funny thing of, like, hey, Ichi death means death Karash, and it's like, haha, that's pretty good, right? And the entire time, Lady Richa is just sort of seeing all of this various stuff, and it just seems like she's a little bit reserved, all things considered, right? As we see that she just goes over and prays to Lord Bakugami, right? We then look inside of Lord Bakugami, where we see this weird dude sitting in here. He's sort of got, like, a big ear, so it sort of seems like he's the actual body of the tapir itself, possibly, and, like, the tapir's just, like, a disguise of some sort. Really don't quite know. But we see that, like, he's, of course, like, praising to, Lord, World Hater some more. He's like, hey, I recognize Gokuraku, but who is the other human? Oh, well, it's just another bug to switch. He's just like, ah, my god of destruction, if I may make a bouquet out of heads of this country's people, would that be enough? Would you be pleased with me? It won't be long now before I can see you. Ha ha ha. At this point, we cut over back into the mansion or we cut into the sort of like royal mansion as we cut into Lady Richa's room. As we see this, she's sort of like sitting in there. She's looking at a photo of her with her father and her mother, presumably, and she's just taking a very nice look at it. As all of a sudden, somebody enters the room through one of her windows. As we see it's none other than Gokuraku, and he's just like, uh-oh. Somebody's not being careful. You really ought to make sure to lock all of the windows. And she's just like, oh, as we see that Gokuraku just approaches her and then grabs her by the hand, leans down and kisses her straight on the hand as he just says, I'm home, elder sister. And we see that Ichi is just like, oh, Gokuraku, I'm so glad you're okay. And we see that Ichi and, of course, Uro are watching through the window. And that's where we end off this chapter of Ichi the Witch. And, man, I honestly did not expect this to be the twist we were going to get here, is that they're brother and sister. Granted, it sort of makes sense because, of course, last chapter, it seemed like Richa had some interesting thoughts on Lord Bakugami itself, and it also leads into the whole idea of, like, hey, even though she was the one who found Lord Bakugami, does she also know what's going on with it and why Gokuraku hates it so much, or is Gokuraku trying to liberate Rito from something? It's just like a little bit of an interesting dynamic, and one that I really like for sure. This chapter of Ichi the Witch was absolutely amazing, right? Well, next up is Ruri Dragon, and this is really a whole chapter about Ruri coming to terms with who she is and really being like, hey, I'm going to continue to be this, right? Well, pretty much the chapter just like starts off with her getting out of the pool, getting some water, and pretty much just like saying like, hey, water will put out the flame, so I gotta like just constantly dump it on myself, and that will pretty much work all the time, right? As she really just has this big area of like her mental thoughts, just is like, hey, until recently, I was totally normal. And it all changed because I grew these freaking horns. To be honest, I don't love it when people get a kick out of me, and I'm not even enjoying any of this. Is it really that fun? I mean, I guess it may be. Like, there's nothing particularly horrible about this, but it's clear I can't live my normal life anymore. Well, I mean, but what is normal anyway? Not so long ago, I was totally normal, and I wish I could have stayed normal. Well, maybe I was never normal in the first place. Either way, I wish I could have had normal relationships as a human and not a dragon, when I wouldn't have people dancing around the issue or walking on eggshells for my sake. If only I'd reached out then and made friends in my pre-horn era. As we see that she sort of runs up to all of her friends as they're just like doing stuff, and apparently Ruri is participating in the relay race, so she needs to be able to sort of get in there and do part of it. We see that, of course, the guy who, I forget all of their names in this moment, because like, this series is a bi-weekly series, and like with all of these like various like just regular Japanese names, it's sometimes hard to remember them all. But the guy who's trying to get Ruri's number just says like, hey, it doesn't matter, I'll chat her up myself, and this personal victory for me, I want to do for my own sake, pretty much, right? Sort of leading me to believe that we may be getting some romance in Ruri Dragon soon, which may be a little interesting, right? But either way, Ruri just thinks like, hey, the relay race, it's the only event I'm participating in. I dealt with all of this just to do a little bit of running. And she's like, nah, not even I'm convinced. All of this kind of sucks. Making a bunch of friends, thinking about how all of them must feel, and being all sociable. None of that was really ever my strong suit. Sure, it's been fun, but was there really any point to it? I mean, that's how I've always felt. All sorts for sure. Some of them aren't fans of me. Some I want to be my friends. Some I couldn't care for either way. Dragon or not, I'm just trying to live my life just like them. If nothing else, maybe learning that lesson made everything worth it. As we see that all of her various stuff, like her Daemon Fire, starts to come and cloud her body all over again. And we see that she like puts up her palm right to her eye and forces the eternal burning fire right into her right eye, pretty much. And she just thinks like, hey, since I've got no choice left but to burn it, let's make it a focused flame. And she puts it in her eye, and she just says like, hey, Daemon Fire, an undying flame common to all dragons, the third form for all Ryu. As we see that she goes, she finishes up the relays, gives Kashio a hug, and Ruri just sort of walks up. The Daemon Fire goes out in her eye, because like, hey, she seems to be crying a little bit, which is just like, oh, that really makes sense, right? As we see that her and Kashio just give each other a real big hug, and that's where we end this chapter off of Ruri Dragon. It was just simply cute. Just a really good chapter, really good message that Ruri Dragon always tries to give, just like, hey, no matter how you are, just comes to terms with being yourself, and just absolutely amazing chapter, right? Kill Blue is up next, and of course Ogami is going out. This whole chapter is pretty much him interacting with all of the various student council people, or he really only interacts with one of them, right? As we meet this guy, I forget what his name is. We get introduced to him at some point, I'm not mistaken. Yes, his name is Kaede Juraku. Yeah, Kaede Juraku. He's not the student council president, but we see him sort of acting like one for a second, and pretty much what he says is like, hey, the way you join the student council is pretty much, it's done by succession, not by like voting or anything. So the current head has to pass down your position to him. And unless you were in one of the other student council positions, you have to have these various sake cups to be able to take over our ceremonial sake cup. This cup then serves as your badge as council membership, right? Which is like a really convoluted thing either way, right? But to be able to be eligible to even be in the club, you have to attain the leadership position and shown a record of accomplishment that would justify making people want to pretty much have you in the student council, right? And Ogami's like, I don't really know if I have all of that ability, right? Well, eventually some people bust into the room, and we see they're members of the judo club who are like, hey, you recently shut down our club because we did too many violent things, and we don't particularly like all of that. Ogami deals with them after Kaede pretty much says like, hey, if you deal with these guys, I may think about who you are, right? He pretty much goes off, and then we get introduced to the rest of these student council members. It seems like the other 4, including the president. And yeah, we just get to pretty much their raw designs at this point. We seem like we have like somebody who reminds me of like a ninja type dude who has like the scarf around his neck and is like all very like slicked back hair. It's like very low key. The very tall girl with the accentuated chest, and then the other smaller girl who's just like, okay. And then the student council president who looks like all of the other characters that what is the guy who Fujimaki writes, right? So sort of is what it is there. All right, chapter of Kill Blue, definitely setting up for something more and something better, but also like not the best thing in the world. Next up is Sidcraft, Love is a Mystery. And very simply put, this is a comedy chapter focused all on Elio. I realize I said this is a comedy chapter based on, this is a comedy chapter. Every chapter of Sidcraft is a comedy chapter. I don't know what I'm talking about. It's better for me to use a descriptive like, hey, what girl are we dealing with, right? Of course, like I said, we are dealing with Elio in a moment as we see, like, hey, the famous author Levine Olin is having a book signing, right? And of course, being that Sid is a massive fan of romance novels, he goes and checks it out. We all see that Lulu is there and sort of does a cover-up for Elio during a portion of the chapter, but it's not really anything too important. Sid is pretty much recognizes Elio as not only the girl that he saved all that time ago, but also as a person who recently helped him on a case. And he really starts to say, like, man, this person really has, like, the same facial structure and everything of Elio. And like I said, that is when we end up getting the save from Lulu in the moment, being that she's also a big fan of the romance novels, right? But either way, eventually there's this whole idea of like, hey, this other guy who is a very good selling author doesn't like how many books that she is selling. So she goes through, or this guy goes through and tries to harm her. Sid steps in the way at the end of the day, and Elio's like very much like, oh man, you're so awesome. And that's really all there was to the chapter. There's also a little bit of an undertone where it's like, hey, she doesn't know she has too much more to write anymore, but after all of this and being like, oh man, Sid reignited my love for writing once again. Fine chapter, Sidcraft. Again, just like nothing like shockingly massive or anything, right? Embers is up next, and man, did I just like absolutely love this chapter all the way through. We get introduced to all of the other powerful weapons of the A-rank team, right? All of them sort of like have some things to say and just get introduced. We're like, oh man, Haitani, like you're so cool, right? Sort of going through all of this. We learn about Kurobayashi High School, which seems to be the big rival team that they always have issues with facing, right? Going through all of this, we see that Bugai pretty much says like, hey, when we played them last summer, it was a thrashing. We lost 5-0, which I don't really know soccer that well, but it doesn't seem absolutely amazing at all. We then see that practice starts up, and both Takami and Haitani are going through, trying to do their best at sports, but of course, they're not the best soccer players yet. Like, yes, they do have very good skills, but they're not actually quite that good yet, right? We see that Haitani keeps losing the ball, all things considered, and we eventually see that, I think her name is Yukizuki, if I'm not mistaken, talks with some of the other club managers, right? And they're pretty much just talking about Haitani, right? And the club vice president is like, hey, geez, like that guy's super impressive. Like, he's busting up all that Rambo by himself, right? And Yukizuki just says like, hey, it's not that either. Haven't you noticed? And she just says like, hey, he's not reading lanes or anticipating any feints. He waits to see what the other guy actually does first and still somehow reads faster than them. In other words, he's the fastest delayed reactor. He's going to be a monster. And of course, as we get all this stuff being like, hey, Haitani can be really good at this game, Haitani's like, oh no, this is bad. Real bad, as he's just like, hey, I don't know how to do all of these really, really famous soccer moves, right? He's like, hey, this soccer stuff isn't easy at all, but hey, I really just need to learn. And then Yukizuki just is like, hey, maybe he'll even surpass Yuzin Nerima. which if I had to guess, is probably a really good soccer player out there, and like probably one of the bigger rivals we'll be facing in this series of like probably the pinnacle, right? We then see Hikage, one of the other various managers, ask Yukizuki about teaching Haitani like strategy and tactics, and Yukizuki pretty much just brushes it off, saying that like, hey, he'll pick all of them up as he goes on, right? But later after practice, we see that Hikage runs up and gives a bunch of CDs and books to Haitani, and pretty much says like, hey, got some time, I want to hang out after school, and Haitani's like, hey, what's all of this crap you got here, right? And she's like, hey, it's what it looks like, books and videos, right? And he's like, do I really have to explain the question? And she's like, hey, listen, it's stuff on soccer strategies. Listen, Haitani, you have exceptional reflexes and you're natural. But she says like, hey, you're a bit too dumb, right? Haitani starts to leave like, hey, I feel bad now, I'm leaving, right? But Hikage just says like, hey, no, that's what I meant. Really, you can be the greatest if you learn all this stuff. And Haitani's like, oh, the greatest, huh? As we see that 1 week passes by, a second week, and finally a third. As we see, it is the start of preliminations, right? It's like, hey, the day of the prelims arrived. And we see that Yukizuki and all of the various other A-team members, like the soccer team in general, are getting ready to go through and play the match, right? As Yukizuki just says like, hey, our first opponent is Iba Sherio, huh? They were a rough matchup when we played them last year, and everyone's like, hey, what do you mean by all of that, right? But Yukizuki's like, hey, no problem. We're not the same as last year either. I mean, we've got the star athlete Takami now, right? And the beast called Haitani. As we see Haitani appears with a strategy book in his hand and glasses on, as we see that Hikage just is like, hey, this is Haitani 2.0, right? And like, hey, go on, tell him the opponent's formation. And that is where we end off the chapter with, of course, Haitani going like, hey, 4-4-3. And Hikage's like, it's 4-4-2. You're so close. And that is where we end off this chapter of Embers. I absolutely loved this chapter. I thought it was so funny, and I can't wait to see the moment where, like, yes, with all the studying Haitani's done, he's probably not going to really get anywhere, right? And I just can't wait to sort of see that happen. Embers enjoyed it for sure, right? Star of Beethoven is up next, as we see that, of course, Ichiro leaves the house and goes to Rito Academy to participate in his selection exam, pretty much, right? We see that Claude is there, very, like, not happy about all of this, like, holding up a sign that says, like, hey, you lose, getting ready to use it. But as the whole thing sort of goes on, we see that his playing is actually very good, as we see, like, hey, he's got this gravity to him almost, but it's still not enough. As we learn a little bit about the piece that he's playing, which is, of course, the Asapanada. I think that's how you say it at least, right? As Ichiro just thinks like, hey, how did this happen? How is it that I'm playing this piano? An instrument that I've never thought I would touch again. At first, I hated it. Then I grew to love it. Then we parted ways. As he says like, oh, that's right. Kahoe abandoned the piano once too, after I beat her in a little competition whenever we were little, right? As we just see that she's like, hey, if you're going to beat me that badly, you better become the world's best pianist, right? As Ichiro just thinks like, hey, it makes sense that she snapped when I told her. It makes sense that she snapped when I quit without telling her, right? As he just thinks like, hey, but then I met him. As you get another length of narration all about the piano sonata, the Episonata. Composed around the same time as the Fate Symphony, and just like the Fate Symphony, it wasn't given that title by Beethoven himself. Nevertheless, in Beethoven's entire catalog of 32 sonatas, no other piece matches its level of emotion and passion. The sonata was dedicated to the Count of Brunswick, and is said to have been written for his younger sister, Josephine. The affection between Josephine and Beethoven was mutual, but the pair never wed due to difference in their family standings, among other issues. It is something of a cliche for feelings of love to inspire the creative process. However, a creator having to put aside his fury over a love that cannot be, and his despair over his hearing loss, is far from typical. Grasping for feelings that remain out of reach, confronting the fears of loss, the vividness, the passion, and emotion. I am playing this piano as if I'm binding all of them together with the finest of threads. Please, let me keep playing, please. Let me be a pianist again. As we just get this image of course, Ichiro playing the piano, And we see that almost a heart made out of all of these mechanical bits and pieces is just built in this moment in front of him, as it sort of like shows like, yes, this is a level that Ichiro is possible of playing, right? And we see that Claude and the other testing teacher both just like shocked by this, like totally, right? As the teacher thinks like, hey, whatever that was, it's safe to say that he's overcome his 2-year absence. What's even more striking is the glimmer of a new talent that was nowhere to be seen in Ichiro Yasuo's middle school years, right? And he goes over and says like, hey, Mr. Sakami, what a performance. As Sakami is holding up the you fail sign. But then he smacks it on the ground as he just says like, oh, I now see what you are. The sort of monster that rises from the deaf, wholly transformed. You pass, right? And he goes on a little bit more of a tirade, just saying all this various stuff. I'm not going to read it out, right? But he just thinks like, hey, Ichiro, come back to life, then I'll just have to kill you all over again, right? We then see Kohin, who is drawn in a very weird and honestly a little bit of an interesting way. It's on page 16 if you really want to look, but it's just a little weird. And we pretty much see that she asks how the exams go, and Ichiro just says like, hey, I'll see you in class. And Kohin's very excited about all of this, right? Ichiro gets home, Beethoven's like, hey, how'd it go? And he's like, hey, I exceeded his standard. And Beethoven's like, oh, of course you did. Like, hey, this is a day of celebration. Let us drink. And Ichiro's like, hey, I still don't do that, right? And he's like, hey, go buy some wine anyway, right? And he's like, I'll buy you some sushi. I'm not buying any wine, right? But then we probably do the weirdest cut in manga that I have ever read, as we suddenly cut to Chicago, Illinois in the United States. As we see that there's a guy and a girl sort of sitting together, and the girl's just like, oh, your name's Mashra, right? This assignment, how much do you really believe it? It's 100% impossible. It's not something I can ever say of certainty, which is probably why they give me these insane jobs. And the guy's just like, I mean, hey, even I've heard of this guy. So then, where do you think our Mr. B is? And that is where we end this chapter of Star of Beethoven. And I am just so interested in like where this series is going. We cut to Chicago, we see some palm trees, it looks like the cleanest Chicago I've ever seen, and they're looking for a Mr. B. Now, I don't really think this may be Beethoven. It could be like, hey, like Bach, if I'm not mistaken, or Batch, or whatever it is another famous pianist whose name begins with the letter B. But I even think I saw a Twitter post or something saying like, hey, the name of Star of Beethoven in Japanese is like Star of B pretty much, and that the English just translates to Beethoven since he is the one who is actively in the series. But I'm just like really interested to see where this chapter goes. I did enjoy Star of Beethoven a good amount. If I could type it in, S-O-B, right? Astro Royale was okay. We learned a little bit of the Shikaba backstory. We see that Tendo ended up coming through and sucking the life force out of the father of all of the various people. I forget what his name is. Yeah, I forget what the... I don't even remember their last name even. It's Habaru Yotsurugi, the Yotsurugi father. They go steal all of his life force. Hikaru, or not even Hikaru, Hibaru and Shibata, yeah, Shibata. Is it Shibata or Shitaba? Yeah, Shitaba. We see that they're just going back and forth, fighting with each other. The father ends up dying because of all of this and just is like, hey, don't tell anyone else about this. This is my punishment, pretty much. I'm glad it was you who punished me, Shikaba, right? And Shikaba's not very happy about any of this. Hibaru pretty much says like, hey, if I lose, you do what you want to with the Yotsurugis, but if I win, you'll have to cut ties with Tendo. And he's like, hey, I'm going to use Mankitan, my most powerful move. Let's fight head on with everything we got. Come on, Shikaba. And that's where we end this chapter. Putting it there. Moving on, Hima 10. This is a Kana chapter in pretty much all of the various facets. And honestly, it's a little bit of a weird Kana chapter because it honestly has a weird pace, in my opinion, right? We see that Iomori's at home with his sister, and his sister ended up fighting Kana over, right? Really, she thinks like, hey, these two would be a nice match made together. So pretty much going through all of that various stuff, right? There's just some rom-com stuff as we see that, like, hey, Kana has all of these fancy vegetables. Of course, her family comes from the Kansai region, or, no, she, lives in Nagano, and grew up in the countryside surrounded by all of these various mountains, and shows off all of this really beautiful food. Like, it's honestly a shocking panel going from, like, regular manga stuff to just, like, this beautiful, succulent food. Like, we see some corn, some eggplant, some cherry tomatoes, bell peppers, cucumbers, regular tomato. Like, it all just looks so incredibly nice, right? And Imori's like, hey, thanks, Con. Like, I bet you can't get vegetables like this in Tokyo whatsoever, right? And she just sort of makes note of, like, how good he is at housekeeping, right? He goes off to do something, and the sister just is like, hey, you like kin, don't you? And she's like, what are you talking about, all of that, right? And she just says, like, hey, maybe I can help you out to get with him, right? Which is sort of like, okay, good place for a rom-com like this to go. As we eventually go, and the two of them end up in Iomori's room, pretty much just, like, showing off all of the various stuff, right? Kana goes over and looks at the Iomori shelf and sees that he ended up having 2 of one of the magazines that she gifted him, that of course she has one of her pinups in, right? Oh, we see there's a little thing in the corner, and she says, like, hey, did you notice this, Iomori? These are the pinup entries for Miss Jam. And Iomori's like, oh, what is that, right? And she pretty much explains, like, hey, it's a competition, and, like, hey, these are the top 10. Readers vote and pick the one person for a grand prize. Whoever wins gets a cash prize and a chance to be featured on the magazine's cover. And plus, they get a photo book, right? And Iomori's like, oh, so you were one of the top 10? That's awesome, right? But he's like, hey, this was from May, wasn't it? So, did you not get it? And Kana's like, oh, well, my manager is going to tell me today. And I was honestly too anxious to stay at home about it, so I figured I brought some veggies by here, right? So a little bit of an understanding of why it happened. And of course, as they're standing here, Kana gets a phone call. She answers it, and she ends up winning the grand prize. And she's so very happy. She goes and gives Iomori a really big hug, right? And sort of complains that Iomori didn't hug her back. As Iomori's just like, hey, I'm really happy for her, because I know you worked so hard, right? And like, hey, I've never worked as hard as you have for something before, right? And it's like, hey, I really think you're amazing. The sister comes in, see the two of them almost in some really nice hugging embrace. As they're just walking away, his conscience is like, hey, you remember the promise you made, didn't you? And Iomori's like, yeah, I do. When you get on the cover, I'll cook a meal to celebrate. 3 of us will eat at Yoshino's place. And she's like, the 3 of us? And Iomori's like, oh, did I get that wrong? That's what you asked for, isn't it? And she's like, oh, yeah, that's right. And that's where we end this chapter of Hematin. Like I said, it feels like the pace really gets, like, blown up here. Like, hey, we're in this one spot. We need to have this moment where Iomori cooks a meal for Kana, so she ends up getting on a magazine cover, winning this whole thing. And that's fine and all, but I also think this would be a really nice thing of, like, hey, it's looming on Kana's mind for maybe a few chapters. Maybe we see this chapter, do a few other harem-based chapters with the other girls, and then cut over again. But it also makes sense that, like, we wanted to get this all taken care of in a chapter. And also just realization of, like, hey, what is Iomori's feelings for Yoshino at the same time? It's like, we understand that Kana obviously really likes this guy, but she's also very disappointed when she hears, like, hey, Yoshino's going to be involved in this too. So it's honestly very interesting to know, like, hey, Iomori, how do you really feel about all of these girls? And yeah, a good chapter of Hematin, and definitely one that I did enjoy, right? Ultimate Exodus Kyoshi is up next, and of course, Sosuke just found a baby Kyoshi Harai, sort of just like lazing around on the ground, and Sosuke's doing all of this stuff like, oh, that's okay, what's wrong? There's nothing to be afraid of, little one. What about some upsies? Like, is your seat all comfy, wumpy, doing all of this stuff? And Sosuke's just like, hey, what the heck am I doing here? Like, and also, how did Harai even end up like all of this? Like, hey, if things go back like this, the Black Parade isn't just going to be bad, but it's going to be a massacre, right? And it's like, okay, a demon obviously turned him into a baby, but like, hey, this is probably a poison used by demons, and in that case, he walks over to a fountain of water, pretty much, and just says like, hey, I seek and give in the name of Sotsuke Hitsugi. Please cleanse this foul impurity. As he uses an experimental, or how do we even say this? I know how to say this, but I don't know if I can pronounce it here. An experimental azor to purify the impure, and uses an exorcist holy water technique, goes through and uses Panacea and goes through has pretty much condenses all this water into a bottle, feeds it to Kyoshi, and a few minutes later, he comes up and Kyoshi just like grows up in a moment. But before that happens, a few demons start attacking, and of course, a baby Kyoshi also helps Sosuke fight them all off. So it's a little bit of a cool moment. He wakes back up. He's like, oh, Hitsuki, like, what are you doing around here, right? As he's like, hey, if you're worried about the poison, I took care of it. And Kyoshi's like, oh my gosh, thanks you so much, right? As Kyoshi just, like, can't get this image out of his head of Sosuke being a really nice guy to him, right? But either way, there's a little bit of another joke that happens after that. But Sosuke's like, hey, a moment can mean a difference between life and death. Like, watch yourself, Harai, right? And he's like, hey, don't worry, I will. As suddenly, the wind starts to blow. As we see that behind Sosuke and Kyoshi, we see one of the other demon lords. I think this was one of the higher ranking demon lords just sitting here saying, oh, so you're Kyoshi Harai. As it looks like he has sort of frozen everything in the area. And it seems like, hey, we're about to get a battle between these two and this higher level demon, right? We then see one of the other higher level demons sort of going around here, putting all of these various exorcists into some bags, right? And it's looking very dire. We see a hole gets blown in this demon lord's chest, as we see none other than Sasaki himself coming in to save the day. As he pretty much just says the name of this demon lord, Mukurojima, right? And Mukorojima's like, oh, Sasaki, you're looking so well. Long time no see. I've missed you, right? They have a little bit of back and forth about all this various stuff. And Sasaki's just like, hey, you're the one who turned Yuta, aren't you? And Mukurojima just is like, oh, Yuta, huh? I don't remember any Yuta. Enough of all that. Let's play again, Sasaki, right? It's time for a battle to the death between exorcists, right? As we see at the back, he's holding with all of the exorcists in it. It's been stolen away by High Stakes, of course, the demon, and pretty much see that High Stakes and Sasaki goes through, saves all of them, and Mukurojima isn't very happy about this. He's like, oh, 1, 2, 1, but in that case, I'll call for reinforcements too. As we see that he summons the 9th Demon Lord and the 10th Demon Lord. They seem to be two brothers with each other, right? They don't matter, because Sasaki comes through and completely cuts both of their heads off. Really doesn't even cut most of their heads off. He just, like, cuts them into pieces, and they're very much dead. And Mukurojima is just, like, freaking out, as Sasaki's like, hey, I told you. I want you to come at me, you despicable filth. And Mukurojima's just like, oh, Sasaki, I always knew you were the one I wanted most of all. And that is where we end this chapter for Ultimate X's Kyoshi. Definitely a fun one for sure. Akane Banashi is up next, and really this whole chapter is about Akane being like, hey, Shomei, can you teach me all of these various stories? And of course, Shomei was like, hey, I don't waste my time on pointless things. That is one of my customs. Right? They pretty much go back and forth talking about all of this various stuff. And we see this moment where Shomei thinks back on his sort of life. He got told by Chocho, like, hey, she became a Rakugoku to avenge her father, Shinoji. As we also see Shomei's past as his father just says, like, hey, my son, I want you to take over Shobi and avenge my defeat. As Shomei just is like, hey, never mind, it's nothing, and gets ready to go out for his performance, right? But before he does, he hands Akane this little stopwatch and just is like, hey, would you mind if taking the opportunity to time me? And Akane's like, what do you mean? And he's like, hey, it's my custom. The opportunity to understand that you are wasting your time. I don't think you had the chance to listen to me yesterday. People like you learn faster by observing an example. And as Shomei walks out, everybody is just cheering and cheering until they stop. As we see that he is just walking in a very interesting way, some narration just is like, hey, all of that feather in the air has gone completely calm. It's not like the nervous, tense air before Master Taizen was on. It's like the audience is straightening up in preparation for a truly refined performance experience, right? As we see that Master Show is here, just like, oh, no, that's a beautiful Hakobi, right? And Akane's like, oh, what are you talking about, right? And he's like, hey, I just came to pretty much check up on you and Shomei. I thought the two of you may have butted some heads, right? And it kind of like, oh, thank you for your concern. But pretty much we learned that Hakobi is this special way of walking where you see no in Kyogen theater. Normally you'd think it would distract from the performance. Pretty much it's funny walk, right? Both the precision of his art and being the heir to a great important family, his inherent dignity are elevated into being weapons. He draws the audience attention just from his approach to the stage. It's the fastest possible hook. By the time he appears, you've already been drawn into Shomei's craft. As we just see this clock in the background as we end this chapter of Akane Banashi. And yeah, it seems like we're really building up Shomei as this guy of, hey, he may have some interesting sort of like same revenge idea that Akane sort of had. And maybe that's why he's not training here. Just a really interesting chapter, all things considered. Definitely liked Akane Banashi this week, right? Blue Box is up next, and pretty much this chapter is like, hey, we're getting ready to prepare for really Chinatsu's final basketball bit, it seems, as pretty much we see like, hey, everybody is here all at once, as we just see like, hey, Chinatsu leaves in the morning to go to her basketball game. As they get to the venue, like days and days pass, they get to the venue eventually, and we see that Kyo is there with Taiki. The two of them are sort of like hanging out with each other, as we see that a few other characters there. We see that Karin Ayame and also Haruyu is there, right? Of course, he's like, hey, Haruyu, why are you here? And Haryu's like, hey, my girlfriend Karin wanted me to come, so I am, of course, here, right? Makes a whole lot of sense. And also, he's known Chinatsu for a long time, and being that he recently quit badminton, it also would make sense why he would want to come, right? Though we also see we see Yumeka and, of course, her boyfriend, who's, of course, Joker from Persona 5. You can never convince me that that's not who this guy is based on, right? But the two of them are sort of just, like, hanging out with each other, and Taiki comes over and says, like, oh, Yumeka, did you come over to see Chinatsu's performance, right? And the boyfriend just is like, oh, hey, Yumeka comes to every single game, right? He's like, hey, thanks to you rekindling Yumeka's passion for basketball, I've lost out on a ton of quality time to her, right? And Taiki's like, oh no, I don't like where this is going. As a Joker from Persona 5 just says like, hey, when I ask her out on a date, she has practice, and even when we do go out, it's a cheer at basketball games, right? Like, hey, I know it's a good thing for Yumeka and everyone else, but her meeting you has turned out pretty poorly for me, don't you know? But hey, regardless, thank you for inspiring Yumeka to get back into basketball. Like, hey, I've got my complaints too, but more than that, I'm happy to be able to see Yumeka's face light up. I was moved by how regret could transform into love, right? And like, that is such a nice sentiment, right? Haruyu and Taiki didn't have a little bit of stuff going back and forth about like, hey, Haruyu hasn't done anything but really just studying here in a long time. And of course, like, hey, he thought his whole life was going to be stuck on badminton, but then sort of learned like, hey, there's more to life than that. There's a little bit of a note about growing up, and Taiki just says like, hey, I'm scared of growing up. Like, I only want to play badminton. And Haru's just like, hey, I don't know how childish I'm acting, but he just says like, hey, I was just thinking back to how it's been so long since I've witnessed that kind of straightforward attitude. I remembered how really cool it is to stake your life only on one thing. And of course, yeah, Haruyu once stuck his entire life on badminton, right? Eventually, he just says like, hey, let's go cheer on the Chinatsu Kano who's poured over 10 years of her life into playing basketball. Here is to a good game. As we end the chapters like, hey, it seems like the game is going to be starting next time. Really good chapter of Blue Box. The Elusive Samurai is really actually where I guess it would be going last chapter. We get a pretty nice cover page in the beginning where we see like, hey, Tokiyuki with the 3 of his wives all in wedding dresses. Really makes sense, but we see the backstory of Fubuki here in a moment. We see that he had a really abusive father who really just wanted him to train and grow up to be this big warrior. Eventually, the only way he found to do it was by shoving Fubuki down into a pit, saying like, hey, you can't crawl out of here until winter's over, and hey, you've got like a month of it left, so hey, you're going to have to sit on there without any food whatsoever, but oh hey, your little kid sister's down there, right? And of course, Fubuki ends up coming through, eating his sister, and then killing his father in the same moment, right? And eventually he goes through, kills his father, and sort of his whole life was altered from there. Fubuki in the present is like, hey, my father and my sister left me, and a curse that drained the same wish. I must strive for the top, even if it means sacrificing people, common soldiers, for my former lord, right? As Fubuki just thinks like, hey, I could not tell him this before. I knew if I revealed my past that Hojo Tokyuki would feel intense pity for me. And that's why I waited to tell him in this moment, right? As we see that Tokyuki uses his Demon Heart Buddha Blade attack in the moment, as he just says like, hey, Fubuki, if you can't come back, then I'll end your ambition and your anguish. As of course, Tokyuki is crying a little bit in the moment, right? Decent enough chapter of the Elusive Samurai. I just really find it hard to truly care about this series at this point, just by the fact of like, hey, I still love this series. I still find it super interesting, but like, ever since Goroshige died and Fubuki actually left, it's just hard for me to get truly deeply invested in it, but sort of is what it is there. Witch Watch is our final chapter, of course, chapter number 15, or chapter number 14 here, if I could actually speak and talk about all of this stuff, right? And of course, I was asking for it last week, but we also got a Kanchi joke chapter, which was something I've been waiting for a while, right? We see it's, of course, good old Khan's birthday, and pretty much everybody gets him some pretty cool stuff, and Nico prepares a spell for him, right? It's a spell that turns something into a god, and it'll grant your wishes, right? There's a little bit of a joke like, hey, it'll grant as many wishes as you really want it to, right? As we see Nico uses the power on it, and Kanchi's just like, hey, like a whole 5, like not just one. As eventually he just says like, okay, I gotcha. So if it's just for a day, then I guess I want to like look cooler. Like we'll take a group photo later, and I'm going to stand out against these guys. I want to be real emotive, right? We see the thing like says, hey, be more emotive, does all this stuff, right? Kanchi's like, hey, I want to be more popular, a real pickup artist. I want to be a boulder. I want to move up in the world, but stay humble. I want to be a healthy, down-to-earth guy, right? And those are his 5 wishes. The whole rest of the chapter is just those 5 wishes sort of backfiring on him. We see the first one of course, him being more emotive, turns his facial expressions into emoticons. A little bit of a funny joke because it continues throughout the rest of the chapter. His second wish was to be a pickup artist, right? And we see this sort of encapsulated by Morito standing up, coming over, and picking up Kanchi. Of course, he is to be pickup artist, right? So I guess he is now pickup art, right? We eventually see that Kanchi goes outside a little bit of like, tired about all this various stuff. Of course, his third wish was to be bolder. So every time he says the word be, he says it sort of like in like, hey, it comes out sounding like boulder. So it's like, hey, that's to boulder. I hope the dirty ball, it ain't doing any bugging, right? So sort of like a little bit of a change up to his speech. The fourth wish was to up in the world but stay humble. As we see that he sort of like crisscrosses his legs, sort of like sits in the pose of the Buddha, while also floating up into the air. While his final and fifth wish was to be a healthy, down-to-earth guy, which makes him come back down to the ground. And that is where we end off this chapter on a really funny final joke of Morito carrying him back home as pickup art, right? And that's where we end this chapter of Witch Watch. Definitely a funny one for sure. So we're going to just like set it over here for now. And with all that out of the way, let's just sit down here and rank all of these various series, right? So I really think my favorite chapter has to be Ichi the Witch this week. It was just so much fun in almost every single part of it. So Ichi the Witch. Honestly, like I wrote it here, I really think Ome X's Kyoshi was another excellent chapter. I really loved all of the various Sosuke and Kyoshi stuff. It was just really a whole lot of fun to see. So we'll put, let's type it. Ulti, X-Row, Yoshi up next. We'll put Blue Box next, just like a solid chapter for sure. Followed up by Embers, because again, I thought that was a really fun chapter. Embers. Let's clear out everything that we've put on there so far. And honestly, as normal, let's just go down to the bottom and fill in the bottom as normal. Astro. Royale. Oh, what's above that? ELU. Elusive. Samurai. Put it right there. Probably, as normal, putting a Kill Blue right above it. I think Sidcraft will just be going next by nature. Like, hey, it was a fun chapter, but, like, nothing too crazy. We'll put One Piece, if I could spell Piece. I damaged my finger here. I accidentally hurt it in a not great way, so it's, like, being a little hard to type, being that it is my pointer finger. Like, that's one of the key keys you use, so, like, my typing's not the best right now. Followed up probably with a Witch Watch. It was a funny chapter, but like not much to it than that. And then there were 4 left. Honestly, we'll put Hematin. Like I said, I thought it had a little bit of a abrupt ending, but I still thought it was pretty fun. Star of Beethoven, we're going to probably put here on the bottom. Star of, Beethoven, Star of Beethoven, leaving us with Ru Dragon Akane Banashi. We'll put Akane Banashi right above Ru Dragon. Something just like that. And I really do like this ranking this week, right? And as far as characters go, I think Sosuke was a pretty good one out of Ichido, or Omex's Koshi. I don't think really Ichido Witch had one, so Sousuke. I don't know. I don't think it's Sousuke. Yeah, that's how you spell it. Blue Box. You know what? We're going to go with a character from Blue Box. This is a character that, let's see, was that 2023 when I first nominated him so long ago? Yes, you make his boyfriend from Blue Box. It was actually, what, about the time that this chapter came out a few years ago, so it was like 3/19/2023, and this is the issue of 3/31, so a little bit after the fact, but no, this is the 3/23 issue, so honestly pretty close. And yeah, we're going to be giving it to Yumeika's boyfriend from Blue Box, because honestly, he just had a really good sentiment at the end of the day, right? And hey, with all that being said, thank you guys so very much for watching this video on Weekly Shonen Jump, issue number 17 of good old 2025. Like I said, I thought it was a pretty good issue, all things considered. There were some parts that, like, weren't the best, but either way, still a definitely fun time for sure. And yeah, really for all that out of the way, thank you guys so very much for watching. If you did like this video, I've got plenty of other videos up on the channel on Weekly Shonen Jump. I mean, I've covered every single issue this year, and I've really been covering every single issue since issue number 40 of 2024, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe it was issue number 43. No, I don't think I covered issue number 42. I covered 40, 41, did not cover 42. Maybe I need to just go back and do that so I can say issue 40 like I'm cool like that, right? But either way, thank you guys so very much for watching this video on Weekly Shonen Jump, issue number 17. I'll see you guys next time for Weekly Shonen Jump, issue number 18. And yeah, until then, I'll catch you guys next time. This will be Glowplasma 231, signing out.